Hey, I'm Sven Masterson, one of the co-founders and mentors in the Mentoring Men community. And I show men how to transform stuck, dying, painful, and broken marriages into deeply connected, passionate, and thriving marriages. I talk to men all over the world in many contexts and cultures about marriage problems. And I've seen a lot of very common patterns and themes among men who are struggling in marriage. Now, the words I'm going to talk to you about today, these patterns and things I'm going to share with you, they're not representative of every single marriage. And so if you're watching this and it doesn't apply to you, please understand I'm not necessarily speaking to you. I'm speaking to men in a very specific context, in a very specific story where their marriage is just not going the way they wanted it to. Now, recently, earlier this week, a man in my community posted to our group about some challenges that he'd been having, how his marriage has not been going well for a while, and how recently his wife came to him and said, "Hey, this isn't working. I think we need space. I love you, but I'm not in love with you, and I'd like to be separated." And this man responded, "Well, okay, I respect that's what you want. That's not what I want." And instead recommended, let's get some therapy. Let's get some therapy. And so they've tried this before, and even despite getting extra help, this woman still wants to move away from the relationship. And he's frustrated because in his point of view, well, she hasn't put anything into fixing the relationship. And so I've talked to tons and tons of men who are stuck like this. They're frustrated that the woman they're married to is saying things like, "I need space, I need to find myself, I think we should separate, I think I want a divorce," but yet isn't willing to put anything into the relationship. And so how can a mature and confident, grounded man see such a circumstance? Now, lots of people on the internet, men's coaches and whatnot, will tell you what to do here. What you need to do is go ahead and move on. And I want to just have you consider slowing that down a little bit. Firstly, many men's coaches on the internet are not successful at marriage. They're not men that have been married for decades. They're not men who know how to transform and turn around a failing marriage. They're simply men that oftentimes know how to keep starting new relationships. And so they oftentimes just don't have firsthand experience of how to actually upright a failing marriage, a marriage that is in the disillusionment stage, as all marriages will someday be. And they don't know how to bring it past that into the deeper, more fulfilling stages of marriage that we might call the acceptance stage and the shared mission and purpose stage. These are the beautiful stages of marriage that you simply cannot get to without navigating the very difficult season of disillusionment. And so just be very mindful when you hear men on the internet talk about what to do here. Check out their own credentials. Have they actually been successful at turning around a marriage, their own marriage, in the disillusionment stage? Now, the things I'm going to share with you, I learned first and foremost in my own nearly 30-year marriage, which I'm still in today with the same partner I started with when I was 20 years old. We survived this very difficult stage of the relationship. We almost didn't, because I thought just like the men who are making posts like this in my community. And then I went on to help, using my lessons learned, other men experience the same turnaround. And so I want to share with you the pattern that is leading to an ineffective sense of stuckness. It's a pattern of thinking that leads to not being able to move forward through this, and is oftentimes responsible for leading to divorce. And when I show you a better way instead, to a more effective way to get the life that you want. So the first thing I want to point out to a man who's thinking this way is that the common theme I hear in men like this, and I was like this myself, is to see your life and marriage like this. That there's this happy life that you want, and that you're putting something in, and she puts something in. And so this is how we're oftentimes in culture taught to think about marriage and relationship. We're taught this perspective like marriage is something that's co-created. And it's not that that's incorrect, but it's easily misunderstood and misrepresented to make it seem like for me to have a happy life, I have to put my half in and she has to put her half in. And so what ends up happening, and is happening to the man that made this post, is he feels like he's doing a pretty good job putting his stuff in there. And he's looking over here with scrutiny saying, what's going on? She's not putting her part in. And that's because this really doesn't work. This is based on really a fictitious idea that first of all begins with the concept that I on my own am not whole and complete. And that in order to experience happiness, therefore, someone else in my life needs to become partially responsible for doing so. That, folks, is a lie. It's actually, at a minimum, if it's not a lie, it's at a minimum a misunderstanding of how life works. You see, this is exactly how we think when we're children, that I put a little bit into my life and mom and dad put the rest in there, and that's how I have well-being. And when we take this forward into relationships that should be mature, but we bring things from childhood into that relationship where I can only have the life that I want if other people deliver it to me, we're starting a relationship on a foundation of immaturity and childishness. Now, I'm not saying that to shame you. I'm saying that as a man who did this myself. I entered a relationship of marriage at 20. And whether you entered at 20 or 40 or 70, if you come into it with the expectation that to have a happy life, someone else needs to create or co-create it, you're starting in a position of disadvantage. Here's what happens, and here's what happened to this man, here's what happened to me, and here's what happens to men who are stuck in this way of thinking. When you believe that, hey, I've got 50%, or whatever percentage, I'm just going to use 50, and this person has 50%, you end up scrutinizing and seeing how well are they using their energy in creating the life that I want. And this leads to, if you heard me say this in other videos, keeping a ledger of sorts. It leads you to scrutinize what your partner's doing, what they're not doing. And you fundamentally start to judge them. And you're judging them based on your perception of what it would look like if they were doing this right. And your partner will feel that as scrutiny, blame, judgment, disappointment, frustration, and basically like they can never do enough to make you happy. And they're right. They can't do enough to make you happy because happiness is not created by others in our life. Happiness is an inside game. We have to be responsible for creating our own happiness. When we were little, did mom and dad have anything to do with that? Sure, right? But if they never raised us to actually learn how to create our own happiness, then we're still living in the immature, dependency-based story that other people create the life I want. That is fundamentally immature. Now, here's what a lot of men do as their strategy. They say, hey, I don't like what you're doing. Before you give up on the marriage, let's go see Mr. or Mrs. Therapist. And so they drag a woman into therapy. And what they're really doing, oftentimes the man doing that, is he's trying to get reinforcements who will say, oh, I see your unhappiness. Wife, what are you going to do about that? Wife, here's how you can understand this man's needs. And so now you've got two people basically justifying this man's immaturity and neediness and saying things like, well, what you need to do is just communicate better. And so let me tell you something. There's no amount of communication that improves neediness. I'm not suggesting in any way that communicating is bad, but communication for the purpose of basically saying, I'm needy and it's your responsibility to fix my neediness does not fix relationships. In fact, especially when there's a third party like a therapist or counselor who's basically reinforcing a man's neediness and his demands and expectations that she fix that, this woman will rapidly leave the relationship at the very first opportunity she has. And she's, to be blunt, she's pretty justified in doing that because that relationship is not a place where she can actually experience things like true love, true acceptance, warmth, appreciation, and gratitude. Instead, she's a bondservant. She's on the hook for supplying this man's happy life or some portion of it. But if she's like most women, she's actually tried that for a while. She's put something in there and she thinks she's doing okay. Then she goes and sits in a therapy session of some kind and hears her husband say, I'm still disappointed. I still have unmet needs. If you would just do this more, if you would do this less, if you would stop this, start that. And a woman just says to herself, geez, when is it ever going to be enough? And so the therapist, this is not a problem of therapists, by the way. I'm not anti-therapy. I really appreciate people that do this line of work because they have a tremendous amount of perseverance to try to sit in circumstances like this where somebody is trying to get another person to meet their most fundamental, intangible needs. And so the therapist does their best to try to broker a deal where basically each party tries to renegotiate having their needs met by other people. It doesn't work. This is why, even despite a significant amount of people going through this process, the marriage divorce rate is still over half. And out of the people that divorce and people that remarry, the even higher majority of them will divorce again. And if they get married a third time, by the time a man gets married a third time, man or woman, their chances of divorce are 86%. This does not work. And it's fundamentally built on a misunderstanding of this, that a happy life is created in a companionship. That's not true. A happy life is a prerequisite for a good companionship, not a byproduct of companionship. Happiness is not created in us by other people. It's created by recognizing that we're already whole, we're already okay, and I don't need anything and anyone to complete me. Instead, I can understand and come to see myself as already whole and complete. I can choose happiness, I can choose gratitude, and then I can share that with another person in a relationship, not so they're the source of my happiness, but that they're a place that I can share as an outlet for that happiness. That's how you move in a new direction in marriage. And so, brother that posted this, if you're watching, I want you to understand that your wife is feeling this. She's feeling basically tremendously on the hook and pressure for being the provider of your happiness. You see, you've got an idea of what it would look like for this marriage to work out. And to be direct, you're judging her and pressuring her that she's basically doing a crappy job. And that's not going to be something that's going to net you more closeness, more interest, more attraction, and more intimacy. Instead, this is repulsive to a woman. It's basically saying, hey, let's have a great big epic party. I want there to be cake. I want there to be a charcuterie board. I want to have balloons. I want to have inflatables. I want to have the best food ever and a DJ and whatnot. And she says, okay, great. What can I bring? And he says, the inflatables, the charcuterie board, the food, the DJ, and basically says, well, I want you to create that party. Well, that's not an invitation to something great. That's an invitation to be indentured to create something I want. That is not an attractive proposition to a romantic partner because it's not an invitation into something you're already doing, you're already being, you've already created. In fact, it's basically saying, I need you to create my life, my wholeness, my sense of okay, my sense of well-being. And on top of that, you're doing a crappy job. I'm not happy. When can we have sex again, by the way? That's exactly how women feel when we do this. We are putting all this significant pressure, the pressure of our well-being, the pressure of our sense of okayness, the pressure to fix the marriage, and at the same time blaming and scrutinizing, etc. This will not lead to a restored marriage. This leads to a very rapid and hasty departure from the relationship and usually almost always ends up in divorce if it's going to keep going. So what is a better way? Well, the better way is to see relationships as basically being an intersection of me and she. When I live in a place where I'm living whole, I'm just going to represent this with 100%, meaning I'm owning what I need to experience my sense of well-being and wholeness. And my partner learns to do the same. Now, this is not all at once, but then we get, instead, is this space in here, the overlap of two people experiencing wholeness, right? That's what a mature relationship looks like. And you don't get here overnight. You get here by each person basically focusing on what it means to them to be whole, to have a sense of well-being, etc. Now, we don't get to judge what other people do to define themselves. If my wife says, well, in order to be whole, have a great sense of well-being and completeness, I need to do this, and I need to experience this, and I need to, have these moments in my life, this kind of use of my time. That's beyond my judgment. I can have a perspective and opinion about it, and I absolutely do. But I can't judge her saying, nope, that's not right. You have to do this. Because the only reason I would do that is that I'm trying to get her to serve me, because I don't know how to do this on my side. And so what we find in the Mentoring Men community in our approach helping lots of men turn these kind of marriages around is if a man will just stop all of the focus on what his partner should or should not be doing and instead directs all that energy back to himself. What do I need in order to live my best life? He cannot answer that question in a way that puts someone else on the hook. If you answer the question, what do I need to live my best life and to feel whole, with somebody else's name, you're living in an immature story of dependency. You're not living in a place that is a good foundation for a relationship. You're living actually in a place that is the foundation for codependency, enmeshment, and emotional pain and suffering. And so when we show men how to be whole in and of themselves, you don't need another human being on the planet to be whole. Does that mean you don't need other human beings on the planet? Absolutely not. We're social, relational creatures, and we love relationships in the Mentoring Men community. We love the idea of community. We love interdependence. But you can have and experience all those without dependency and enmeshment. In fact, we would say you can't really, truly experience the full depth possible in a relationship with another human being until you're whole, because you'll become disingenuous, you become sneaky, manipulative. You'll have covert contracts with people where you're basically doing things, trying to get them to give you the response that you want or need so that you can feel better. That's just deceitful. It's not honest. It actually encourages everybody to be inauthentic, to hide their truth, and to tell each other what they think the other person wants to hear so we can keep the good things coming to one another. And that's how you just get a messy situation where nobody actually is truthful, nobody is actually authentic, and everybody's disappointed because everybody's trying to manipulate each other to have their needs met. What we find is when we help people be whole, the very first place this shows up in a good way now is that the marriage improves, because a man stops all of the covert contracts, all the nice guy behavior. He stops all of the deceitfulness and being inauthentic, all the stuff he does that he as a side effect because he's trying to get her to keep meeting his needs. Men devote a massive amount of energy to trying to keep their partner happy and cordial and giving to them when they are highly dependent upon them. And all of that energy just goes when they stop. And now they can actually learn to live honestly, authentically. That's what it means to live with integrity, letting your outside be what's truly on the inside. They can learn to stop being a manipulator, stop actually hiding their truth, stop telling little white lies, Stop being fake. And all of that is extremely trustable. And when we're authentic and we're real, we're also vulnerable. And when we're vulnerable, we're intimate and connecting. And that leads us right back to living the very life that we wanted to live. You see, you cannot be vulnerable and authentic when you're in this, because you won't tell the truth, because you're playing this dynamic where if I don't put the $2 in the happy life today, she won't put $2 in it, and I need this happy life, and so I'm not going to tell her what I really think. I'm not going to be honest. I'm going to just try to keep everything nice and copacetic. I'm going to try to keep her happy with me, because if I don't keep her happy with me, I can't be happy, because I don't own my happiness. She owns part of my happiness, right? Doesn't work. So if you want to grow into the deeply connected, passionate, intimate relationship, the solution starts first by actually experiencing your own transformation. And that transformation has to be an experience you're committed to, regardless of what your partner is committed to. You have to love being authentically a whole version of yourself more than anything in the world, including your relationship. Now, that feels really scary to a lot of people. They're worried, well, if I do this, won't she just go pew and shoot out of the picture? I'll never see her again. She might ask for a divorce. I might lose half my assets and only see my kids half the time. Very real possibility. But let me tell you something, brother. Way more of a possibility, actually probability, if you hang on to this. When you do this, and this is the risky part of learning to be authentic and real and vulnerable, when you focus on you and you come to a deep place of self-acceptance, and that self-acceptance manifests in this way in your life where you do not need other people to make you happy. You don't need other people to approve you. You know your value, your worth, your significance on your own. Though you would love for people to respect you, the only respect you're really concerned about is your own respect for yourself. Though you love it when people appreciate and validate you, the only real appreciation and validation you must have is your own. When you live in this state of wholeness, you're creating the foundation to be you, to be authentically, consistently, openly, and honestly yourself. Not a nice guy, not a guy with covert contracts, not a guy who shames and blames his partner for his lack of happiness. A man that owns himself, a man that's very clear. This is my life. The only leader in my life is me. Now, when you do that and you're actually being you, you're going to be vulnerable, like I mentioned before. And vulnerable men are self-revealing men. Hey, this is me. And you're going to see it. And I don't care if you like it or not. I have to be real, because my value system for myself says, in order to have integrity, I must be authentically me. And that cannot have any tendrils in you to where I'm only willing to be real if you tell me I can be real, right? So when you do that, you're building vulnerability. That is mega trustable, mega trustable. Everybody loves to be around people who are authentic and real. Even if sometimes that's a bit scary, it's the basis for true connection and intimacy. You see, when I'm living as a person who self-sources my wholeness, and I'm authentic and real and vulnerable, I'm actually creating the best possible context for my partner to do the same, because they recognize, well, wow, he accepts himself unconditionally. He's not actually judging himself. He's not actually making his happiness conditional upon what other people think. I'm truly emotionally safe. I can be me and not worry that he's going to judge me. He's going to blame me. All the stuff that's going on here, by the way, which is why the woman in this relationship does not feel emotionally safe, why she wants relief from the pressure, relief from the judgment, and wants space. Because that's what she feels. When you go back here and you're living in a place of wholeness, you're creating the very foundation for the life you want. This is how you get to vulnerability, intimacy, connection, passion, and romance. The path starts with a radical transformation of yourself, specifically a radical form of self-acceptance that leads to a radical form of acceptance for other people. Now, I'm not going to get into all that in this video because that's what the work is, and there's a lot of journey to take there. If you're watching this and you're like, hey, that guy is just nuts. Hey, I can appreciate you don't share the same opinion. That's okay. I would love to know in the comments what it is you disagree with and what your plan is for turning around troubled marriages so that I could learn from you. If you're watching this, however, and you're saying, you know what, something here is resonating. This is clicking. This guy has actually turned his marriage and helped other men turn their marriages around. This actually looks like it makes a little sense. I want you to reach out by going to the description and clicking the link to set up a session with me. I'm not going to try to sell you something. I'm going to unpack this very idea with you and your story directly. We'll do that in a session together it's completely complimentary, and it's really just designed so that you can get a taste of what this looks like in your life, and you can start that process by clicking the link in the description. If you want to know more about that radical journey to self-acceptance, if you want to actually be able to look in the mirror, maybe for the first time ever, and not loathe yourself, if you want to be able to be the kind of guy that doesn't get uncomfortable when he sees himself in pictures and video, when you want to be the kind of guy that knows that he has value and worth and significance and doesn't feel, completely isolated in a crowd and lonely and like everybody in the world does not appreciate him. Well, I know all about that journey. That's how all this stuff came to be. And you can find out more about how to address that in our program called The Renewed Masculine Man. You'll find a link in the description for that too. If you want to just explore our community a little bit more, which is a really low risk way to get more familiar with stuff like this, you can also find a link in the description for just a simple membership to Mentoring Men. It's a men's only community. It's not that we don't care about women. We greatly value women. It's that as men, we only feel like we're qualified to share how to be a better man with men. And we would love it actually if there are women doing the same for women. And so you can find a link to get started with that also in the description. With that, I wish you the best in turning around your painful, broken, disconnected marriage. If I could be of assistance to you, I hope you'll reach out, and I'll talk to you in another video. Take care.